Here we go. Bored already? Hope they're not coming. Hope they're not coming down with something. Waiting for the official iPad time. Yeah. Don't want anybody to get mad because we started early.
Can't wait for the alarm to go off.
Yeah. We'll call the meeting to order. Will clerk please call the roll?
Nancy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
John.
Here.
Kurt.
Present.
Jay.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
And Cindy. Here.
We have a full assembly tonight. It's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we need approval of the regular meeting minutes from October 6th and the special session minutes of October 10th, 2014. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Lynn to approve the minutes from those two dates. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. So now it brings us to tonight's meeting agenda. We need a motion for approval or amendments to the meeting agenda for tonight. Entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved. I'll second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lagodakis to approve this evening's meeting agenda. Any discussion or changes wanted by the Assembly? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. That moves us on to public hearings and bid awards. This evening we have two bid awards, or two public hearings, no bid awards. Public hearing on proposed ordinance 2014-20. New sections to Title 11, Traffic Code, and repealing the remainder of Title 11 of the former City of Petersburg Code. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to talk to that under the public hearing, that ordinance? Okay, seeing no one interested, we'll move to that public hearing is closed. And we'll move to the public hearing on proposed ordinance 2014-21. Adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes. And a note to that, the ordinance has been amended since its first reading, and the fire department has added a vehicle to the budget, and we'll discuss that when we get to the second reading of that ordinance. So anybody interested in talking to that under the public hearing, ordinance 2014-21? Seeing none, that public hearing is closed. Any visitors' views related to items on tonight's agenda? Mr. Lynch, could you please state your name and who you represent, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. My name is Brian Lynch. I'm the Executive Director of Petersburg Vessel Owners Association. I'd like to speak to item 14B, resolution supporting International Joint Commission involvement in the Alaska-British Columbia transboundary region. I urge your support of this resolution. A couple things here. I would actually recommend or request a couple of changes to this. On the fifth whereas, it says, whereas there has been little transparent dialogue between Canada and the U.S. regarding the proposed projects and specific ways to ensure our interests are protected. I'd actually recommend you strike that. While that is kind of directed to federal involvement, there has been some state involvement in these projects on some working groups with the KSM mine. So that, whereas, really it might create some confusion as to what it's really directed at, but there has been some state involvement in at least one of these projects planned. On the next to the last whereas, It says, whereas the Canadian BC permitting process have not offered opportunity for these voices to be heard. That's not entirely correct either, because there have been comment periods on the KSM mine where there has been opportunity to comment on that. So it's those two, even though they're kind of correct, they could be somewhat misleading as to what they're actually saying. So
being the author of this resolution, basically, we're looking at tonight, you would suggest striking both of those?
I would recommend striking both of those. Yeah, yeah. I think it would. It doesn't really add anything particular to the resolution as to what the point of it is to try to prompt IGC involvement in the approval of these mines, or at least in the process. So.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, Brian, on the first, whereas you want us to strike on the dialogue, would it be better to clarify that there hasn't been sufficient dialogue at the federal level, since we're asking Murkowski and Begich to get involved, and or no? Would you say just strike it, period?
That's up to you. This is essentially your resolution to deal with it. Oh, excuse me, through Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to speak out of turn here. You could do that if it made very clear there has been some state involvement, but offhand I'd say you might just want to strike that, because I don't think it really adds anything to the resolution. It might just be easier to do that. So.
Okay, any other questions of Mr. Lynch about this resolution? Okay, thanks, Brian.
Hey, thank you.
Yep. Do you have something,
Quick one,
Kurt?
Brian. Hey, did Sitka and Borough, looks like they're the ones that presented this resolution. Did they vote on this resolution already as it's written?
Mr. Walter, I believe they passed it on October 14th.
I believe this has been passed.
Yeah,
by the
they
Borough
have
Assembly.
passed. I think it was on the 14th.
So then Petersburg is going to amend it and then pass it on?
Yeah.
Okay, just so I'm clear.
Actually, I haven't read the Sitka one. Are they identical, or I heard they were very close?
They're-
Right.
Yeah, they're virtually identical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Got to get back to my agenda here. Thanks, Brian.
Thank
If
you.
There's no other questions. Hit the wrong button. Bear with me. Time out. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. You have yours, Steve?
Switch.
Yeah. I've got notes on this one. I might want to see if you could get it up. I don't know why it says it's in progress. I hit the wrong button or something. So, okay. Any more visitors' views related to tonight's agenda? Want to come and talk? Brain dead here. Mike. Trying to figure out what's wrong with my iPad. Okay. All right. Please state your name and who you represent, Mike, please.
Okay, my name is Mike Stainbrook, and I represent myself. I'd like to say good evening and thank you to the Assembly. I'm a Borough resident, and I'd like to speak briefly to two items on the agenda. The first one is under new business, item B, Resolution 14-17, a resolution supporting International Joint Commission involvement in the Alaska and British Columbia Transboundary Region. I think Petersburg Vessel Association wrote a tremendous resolution, and as a fisherman, sport, commercial, and subsistence, I support this resolution with the changes that Brian just suggested wholeheartedly. I would like to express my thanks to PVOA for presenting the resolution to the Borough and to the Alaska Municipal League. Secondly, I would like to address discussion item D 14-319, that is referencing to the Skagway ordinance addressing herbicides and pesticides. I read their ordinance, and I feel that Skagway's desire to protect their quality of life and the health of its citizens, its animals, and its ecosystem, as well as mentioning watershed, is as important in Skagway as it is to us here. It's important for our fish, and it's important for us. We should, as a borough, consider a similar ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions of Mike before he steps down? Thank you, Mike. Sue? State your name and who you represent, please, for the radio audience.
My name is Suzanne Wood, and I'm a local resident, and I'd like to address discussion item 14319. And I like the approach that Skagway is taking with their issue there. I don't really know if we can adopt a similar approach, but from my own personal experience here in Petersburg, I live on the water side of Mitkoff Highway out at 6.5 Mile, and the property has had water rights since 1972, and it comes from the mountainside, and it crosses under Mitkoff Highway, and we live on the, like I said, the beach side, so that would possibly incur spraying on both sides of the highway. And we berry pick, and we use the water that comes from the hillside. In the summer, it's used for our vegetable garden, and it has domestic use. Our neighbors on both sides, actually there's one to the south of us, they have a well, so they don't directly drink their water. But further on down, there are houses that also draw from the hillside, so spraying would impact them as well. There are family, grandkids that play in the narrows. There's all kinds of wildlife that traverse our properties, and so from my experience, this is not wise. And then this morning, there was a report that the governor participated in with KFSK, and he made mention that he was unaware of the issue here locally. So I would recommend, if the Assembly chooses to pursue this issue, that he be brought into the picture, because this is a public safety issue, environmental issue as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any questions of Suzanne? No, thank you. Any other visitors with views related to tonight's agenda? Karen? Okay. Yeah, well.
My name's Karen McCullough, and I'm a Borough resident, and I'm going to speak to the same two things that Mike did. I think they're somewhat similar in that we're talking about quality of our environment and quality of our waters and quality of the location in which we live. I think the transboundary issue is getting a lot of momentum, and I'm glad to see it. And I'm hoping to hear a favorable passage of that resolution. Secondly, I've always been very concerned about herbicides and pesticides. I was married to an Agent Orange veteran who is now deceased. The veterans didn't know what was being dumped on them. They got the effects after, and they're living with it still. We are more aware now, and I would urge a very strong stand by the borough. I understand there's some legal difficulties with jurisdiction of state land versus other lands, but I do believe in reading the resolution from Skagway that they have found a way to at least make a strong stand. And then I agree with what I heard on the radio today with Governor Parnell, and I'm hoping we can bring him into the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Joe, you want to state your name and who you represent, please?
Hi, my name's Joe Sebastian. I'm a resident of Kupernoff. I'm here to talk about the herbicide issue with the state, and I want to thank Nancy for bringing this up. I know the Assembly's been talking about it for the last year or so, and it seems like it's starting to bear down on us. I strongly oppose this state action on the herbicide spraying of the roadways and the vegetation. I think it's important for the borough to find alternative options and be able to estimate the costs of these options of this vegetation removal in order to present this to the state. Governor Parnell was on the radio this morning, and he was touting the science in the use of herbicides. Whose science do you think he's using? probably Monsanto's science. As a commercial fisherman, I don't want to be a hypocrite about toxics, but fishermen have enough toxics in their lives, and we all know this. And poisons used in the marine environment, bottom paint probably top at the list, epoxy paint, antifreeze, used engine oil, and as citizens we have the pollution, the everyday pollution of the modern world, from jets passing by overhead every single day to tugboat exhaust and other big ship traffic. But this application of herbicides proposed by the state is one we can probably live without, and maybe with some constructive thinking avoid altogether. In the event that the state wants to push this issue and not accept any alternatives, I think really this is a kind of thing that a borough needs to stand up against, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were other municipalities and boroughs, both in Southeast and Central, that would willing to join a class action suit against the state, and it's kind of forcing this herbicide use on its citizens against their will. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Any other visitors this evening with views related to tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item. Visitors' views unrelated to tonight's agenda. Any views unrelated? Okay, board, commission, and committee reports, there's none. No items on the consent agenda. Report of other officers, there's none listed. That brings us to the mayor's report. Tonight we have assembly appointments. Mayor Jensen will provide recommendations for appointments for the following positions. Vice Mayor, I would like, if there's no objection from the assembly, I would like to appoint Cindy Logadakis to Vice Mayor if she's willing to take the post again. Okay, is that okay with everybody? Okay. And Southeast Conference and AML representative, I was that last year. I'd like to continue in that position if there's no objections to that. Is there any objections? Anybody else want to do it? Okay. Liaison to the harbor boards. Mr. Walter, would you be willing to do that again?
Sure.
Okay. Public safety advisory boards. Nancy, were you the liaison for that before? Who was that? Kathy, do you?
John Holt was the last one.
John Hill, would you be willing to do that, Nancy, or if not, anybody else interested?
I could do it, I guess. How often do they meet?
I am not sure. Kathy?
Not often.
Not.
Maybe once a quarter max.
Okay.
Okay.
I can fit that in.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we've, did I miss anything, Kathy? I think I covered them all. Okay, now we're on to the mayor's written report. Seeking letters of interest for vacant elected positions. The borough has vacancies on the hospital board, planning commission, and public safety advisory board. We are seeking letters of interest from residents who would like to serve on any of these boards until October of 2015. Assembly appointments to non-elected positions. There's the SEPA board member. The borough is currently advertising for letters of interest to serve on the Southeast Alaska Power Agency Board of Directors for the calendar year 2015. And we've advertised that, and I think we'll wait till the second meeting in November, which is going to be the 24th, to make that appointment. The next one is an expiring term on the Thomas Bay Power Commission. Robert Larson's term on the Thomas Bay Power Commission will expire at the end of this year. Appointments to the commission are for 3 years. I have a question about this appointment. Even is the Thomas Bay Power Authority going to stay in existence now that SEPA has taken over? Is there any official position taken on that yet? Do we want to?
I can kind of speak to it. They haven't made their mind up yet. They have no budget.
Well, that's what
and I think they're still in discussion as far as whether they will continue to meet and in what format will they keep meeting. So without Robert Larson here, I'm not sure what their latest opinion is.
Well, I guess he's there till the end of the year, so maybe they'll make up their mind by then if they're going to keep the Thomas Bay Power Commission or not, since the SEEP has basically taken over the O&M of the Tyee project. Okay, the Borough Ordinance 2014-18 requires a member of the Assembly or the Assembly's representative to be a member of the newly reestablished Historic Preservation Committee. Is anybody interested from the Assembly on being on the Historic Preservation Committee?
I'd love to,
Okay. Jay?
if no one has any argument with that.
No? That's
Cool.
Thanks for putting your name in. Okay, change in November meeting schedule. Due to several Assembly members attending the Alaska Municipal League Conference in Anchorage, the second meeting in November has been rescheduled to November 24th. And since we're talking about meeting dates, I will not be here for the first meeting in November, which is the 3rd. Public community meeting with DEC regarding state regs on herbicide and pesticide use. We have yet to secure a meeting date from DEC on that, so we're still waiting to hear from them. I know Senator Egan's office was working on that, I believe, so he is still our senator until the November election. And then we have a list of, we have 2 vacancies on the hospital board, so that's what we're going to be advertising for. One's 3-year term and the other one's looks like a 2-year term. Planning Commission, we have 4 members after the last election, and we need 3. The Harbor Board is full. Library Board is full, and we're vacant 1 on the Public Safety Advisory Board. So anybody that's interested from the public, please send your name to myself or Kathy O'Rear. And then vacancies, let me go through this. Well, we have a vacancy on the Thomas Bay Power Authority, but we're not sure if at the end of the year, and Thomas Bay, or the Southeast Alaska Power Agency, which we're going to do the second meeting of November. And Jay stepped up for the other appointment, member appointee to the Historic Preservation Committee. So that's the status of those committees. And that's it. Now it's time for the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to Sheila and her staff, the Medicaid recertification for the manor has been approved. That's a 2-year approval process. We have to go through every 2 years. So again, thanks to them. Big deal. That's a big part of the business up there is Medicare and Medicaid, and being certified for that keeps the place full. Final touches are being put on 10 recently installed windows at elderly housing. This was basically a retasking of some excess grant money that to use it was from the roof project. We got permission from the legislature to use it to replace some of the windows in elderly housing and go through more energy efficient windows. We had some minor issues with some of the trim that we wanted the contractor to come back and fix, but the windows are actually all installed and in good shape. Liz Cabrera on my behalf met with Bob Weinstein from Senator Begich's office when he was in town when I was traveling. Basically went over all of our federal items of interest list with him, and did get him a tour of the police station while he was here. The dismantling of the Ellingstad Tream House at 1011 Wrangell Avenue, the roof and a portion of the front wall were removed through the month of September. Does not appear to have been much progress in October. This was in front of the judge 2 months ago, and the judge has still not rendered a decision on the case. So we have no idea at this point what the situation is. Our attorney is trying to follow it, but it's kind of a difficult thing to prod a judge. PEDC was awarded a $26,000 grant from USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program to kind of promote and expand our local farmers market. Chamber of Commerce in PEDC is sponsoring a booth at the Pacific Marine Expo or Fish Expo in Seattle. This is November 19th through the 21st. We are encouraging local marine vendors to provide brochures and business cards for distribution at the show. If you get them to the folks, they'll actually distribute them, transport them and distribute them when they're down Public Works crew has been grading roads, ditching and brushing as much as possible leading up to when we start expecting weather to make that impossible. The latest rain may make some of that a little harder to do now. Work continues on the Rasmussen Bridge. The crew, we successfully replaced another of the pilings with assistance from Power and Light. We have one more piling to replace in addition to installation of some cross bracing. All of that work is, the hope is once it's all done, we can get DOT to re-rate the bridge to allow heavier, truck traffic back on it again. We'll see what happens. They've been very reluctant to raise the rating on that bridge, and we'll see after we finish the work. PIA has granted a request that Carl made to relocate one of their rotary composters up to the wastewater plant, and the staff is working on a plan for staging and operating the composter. This is a way to make better use of it and actually can use it up there and then not have to transport things as much. So we'll see how that works. Work continues with Alaska DOT on incorporating the borough's sewer needs within South Nordic Drive and Haugen Drive projects with their plans to repave. Current plans call for bidding one project for both streets and requiring that the winning contractor phase the work so that the local disturbance is minimized. Latest information is the project will be advertised in November. So, Carl, and my apologies for putting you on the spot. Do we know if the bike path was ever put back in, or is it out?
I have not heard
Because I've heard both ways from them.
I'm not sure.
Got it. Thank you. It was originally in, and we were pretty sure it was out, and then we were hearing some hints that maybe they were putting that back in. So as soon as we have an update, we'll make sure everyone here knows. Available now on the Borough website is a link to a quick survey to gauge the success of the current Blue Bag recycling program and seek input from folks on changes or improvements to the program. The survey has separate parts for households and businesses and should only take a few minutes of time to complete. We really encourage folks to do that. We want to make we want to make it work, and we got to figure out what works best for people within the budgets that we have, and so we can plan for some of this stuff down the road. The motor pool will be holding a public auction soon to sell various pieces of surplus equipment, so keep that on your list. Chris went out to the Banana Point launch ramp and would be a vote to allow the Rainforest Ferry folks to work out there. And during some negative tides to basically take pictures and document the current condition of the ramp. There are some minor issues already, nothing to do with the ferries, but with the rock fill around the edges of the concrete planks, and we're going to ask that get replaced and repaired prior to the North End Ferry, Rainforest Ferry folks starting to use it. Chris has contacted Alaska DNR to talk about funding that work and see what they have to say. PIA has been working very hard on Dolphin Street sidewalks and turned out really nice. They've included the 3rd Street sidewalks in their work plan and will replace those sidewalks this year or next year. Again, kind of weather dependent, and what they think they can get done for the rest of the fall. Parks and Rec, just want to thank them and the staff and everyone else that was involved in it for the A&B A&S Grand Camp. Appears to be really big success, over 100 participants, lots of business and community members as well as our staff that were involved in that, and we've got a lot of good feedback. And thanks to the community that were patient with us while we had partial closures related to that. I think it was worthwhile for that, but we know it did inconvenience some folks. We have 8 high school students that are participating in the junior fighter program. Several of the adult firefighters deserve our thanks for helping teach the kids and kind of shepherding that program through the process. The fire department did provide the Learn Not to Burn program to the elementary school during Fire Prevention Week, October 6th through the 10th. Sandy has just returned from the Emergency Preparedness Conference. This is a emergency management grant requirement. It's a grant we receive for doing local area and region-wide emergency planning. And as part of that, they do, active shooter, improvised explosive devices, cyber terrorism, and this was paid through that grant. So the training mandatory, and they pay for it, which is nice. We just finished with 4 of the volunteer firefighters and Ryan attended the Alaska State Firefighters Conference in Kenai. Most of that was paid for through a grant. While Kelly, and this may have been covered in my absence last week, I don't know, with Kelly at the FBI Training Academy, Captain Hamilton is overseeing police functions. Angel, our support services manager, is overseeing the administrative functions at the police department. Kelly's in touch routinely. He gets emails. Talked to him on the phone this afternoon. So he's checking in as often as he can. But as far as boots on the ground, so to speak, it's Captain Hamilton and Angel Warhatch. Finance with the latest borough election on the changes for the senior exemptions related to non-residents. Finance is working on some new senior citizen exemption cards that will have expiration dates. This is based on the recent election to establish a longer term of residency in order to qualify for the exemption card. New cards will be mailed to all qualifying seniors before the end of the year. So we'll mail them out after we go through the process of determining who should get them. We are working on, and it's tricky in some ways, the logistics of putting the harbor billing into our normal utility billing software. Currently it's done separately. This allows some advantages for reporting and some other things, and people could pay their harbor mortgage at the same time they pay everything else, could pay it with a credit card, and it all gets pulled in. We've got to find a way to make that work. This would not apply, as I understand it, to transient boats. That just doesn't work. We need Glow's help and her staff to kind of keep track of that, but we think we can do all of the standard mortgage, so we'll see. Rasmussen grant application has been submitted for $19,450 to purchase display panels and cabinets and educational play equipment and library collection materials for the library. Again, we've just submitted a grant application. We don't know yet if we'll receive it. Wanted to put a plug in. The Petersburg Chess Club is up and running thanks to volunteers Kyle Clayton and Jay Stanton Greger. We'll see if we have any grandmasters in town.
Hopefully.
And I just returned, or I missed the last meeting, from the Association of Government Risk Pools, or AGRIP. It was a training conference for members of insurance pools across the country. We are a member here in the borough of the Alaska Public Entities Insurance, and I was asked to serve on their board of directors, and they wanted their board members to go and get smarter. But basically, they're our insurance carrier for workers' comp, liability, property insurance, and they get it all. Fraud, I think. And it's a way to kind of have input to them on issues that affect us. I mean, for example, while our casualty property rates, liability are pretty standard, in fact, we get a rebate from them every year, workers' comp tends to be an ongoing problem, not just here, but throughout Alaska, because of the medical cost side of it. And so it's a way to kind of keep a little bit more information flowing and letting them know what a big deal it is when workers' comp goes up 30 and 40% a year, and the kind of impact that has on the community. So probably the biggest thing that I got out of the conference, other than some of the social side of it, is meeting people. Throughout the country, there's increased focus on secondary liability for communities. They use the example of the Rhode Island fire that happened a few years back, where the nightclub, the band set off some fireworks and it burned the place. A bunch of people died. And the city ended up getting pulled into that lawsuit because their code enforcement and fire enforcement was not adequate. And, you know, as the attorney who gave the presentation said, personal injury attorneys, and he was the lead attorney on that case, we go where the money is. We look for ways to find ways to pull in where we can get a claim. And so major topic in a lot of the meetings were, you know, are cities and counties doing enough on fire inspection, code enforcement, to make sure that the liability continues to be under control. So already had that conversation with our folks, and we're trying to make sure we've not dropped the ball anywhere. So
All right, thanks
anyway,
for the,
that's it, unless there's questions.
any questions? John?
It's more a form of an update. Fortunately, went past the Dream House today, and the second floor is now on the first floor. I got to see a demolition crew, and I don't know if they intentionally meant to do that, but it is down now.
Thank you very much.
At least that part.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Steve about his report? Cindy?
Not a question, Steve, but I just wanted to point out that if folks did want to send things down to the Pacific Marine Expo, they need to get them in by the first week in November, or we won't have time to ship them down.
Okay, that's from the chamber, I'm assuming. Yeah. I've got a question. This bike path, is that the one that was going to start at the airport and go to Sandy Beach?
That was the plan.
Carl? Have we written any kind of a letter of support, how necessary that is, ever? Or do you think it'd make a difference just to send a letter if there is rumor of it being talked about again, how important we think it is? Because I've bicycled there, and there's no room when there's cars, when there's any traffic.
Mr. Mayor, we have spoken with the DOT project manager quite a bit about that. I think they're very aware how important that is to the community. I don't think we've written any letters in support of it, but they know it's very important to us. And when we do talk to them, it's not that they don't want to do the project. They can't find the money. So they're looking hard, and we'll give them a call and get an update for everyone on where they stand with that part of the project. But they know how important it is.
Okay, very good. I think that's probably covered then. Thank you. No more questions of the manager? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. First item there is ordinances for second reading this evening. First ordinance is ordinance 2014-20, an ordinance providing parking regulations and fines for parking violations and repealing and the remaining chapters of the old city code. The ordinance will finalize the transfer of City of Petersburg traffic ordinances to Borough Code. The Assembly previously adopted ordinance 2013-25 that listed the state statutes and regulations that were adopted for use in the borough to address our most common motor vehicle enforcement needs. I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-20 in its second reading.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Walhooter to adopt ordinance 2014-20 in its second reading. Discussion on this ordinance.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to my previous discussion on it. The last time, I got about 5 points to make. The last time we all had questions about this. But since then, the manager sent to us the piece of the charter that says that in order for the police department, for public health purposes, to be outside Area 1, then the other areas would have to pay for it. So, and right now we have nothing outside of Service Area 1. This particular ordinance pushes it borough-wide for public highways. Papke's is a public highway. And if I'm correct, then why do we want to have an ordinance that we can't enforce, can't enforce at this point, or spend money on? That's my second point. The third one I got is that I got to thinking about it after we left after the last meeting, and the way I read this ordinance is it gives total latitude to the police department, so that if a particular person, and I used John last time because he had a house along there, but if he disagreed with it, he went before a magistrate on it. It gives total discretion to the police officer And whatever John presents, you know, if there's a disagreement, it would have to go to the police officer, as I see it. And so I'd like, based on that, if I'm right on that, I'd like to make a motion that we table this particular ordinance until, we already have one from the old council in effect, and let it go till our police chief comes back and has a chance to take a closer look at it.
Okay, so is that in the form of a motion to table it until
That's my motion, yes.
Chief Swihart
Table
returns?
Until the chief returns.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Strand to table the second reading of ordinance 2014-20 until, I guess, time certain would be when the first meeting after Chief Swihart is back. Any discussion on that? The clerk call the roll.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
Okay, the next reading, second reading for 2014-20 will be the first meeting after Chief Swihart returns from his training.
Mr. Mayor, may I address something?
Sure.
That somebody remember when? It's a minor thing. On the charter piece that I sent out, how do I say this? The formation of a service area and adding of service does not necessarily mean it costs more. I'm not meaning that a service area could be formed and the assembly could vote to say the services will be provided, period, with no cost.
I understand that. If I said
Sure.
it different, said it the other
Not a
way,
problem.
I'm
I just,
wrong.
I didn't want,
Yes,
the assembly makes that call.
thank you.
Okay. So is that what you want to talk about?
That was it.
All right, we'll discuss that ordinance sometime in December, I believe, when Kelly gets back. The next ordinance is ordinance 2014-21, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes. The ordinance has been amended by staff to reflect the payment in lieu of taxes funds to Kupernoff as approved at the October 6th meeting, and to add a request from the fire department to provide for a full-sized SUV at the cost of $32,032 through the state cooperative purchasing program. The fire department currently has a $34,181 balance for the unit within the motor pool fund. If you look into the details, it's been recommended by Mr. Hagerman, Public Works Director. For this, the one vehicle, it sounds like is in pretty sad shape. They're going to put the old one up for sale, is that right? And then move one over to one function and purchase this new one and with some modifications. So I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-21 in its second reading.
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Lagadakis to adopt ordinance 2014-21 in its second reading. Discussion?
I have a question of Carl. If the used snowplow does not work for mounting on this vehicle, which is what you said you intended, how much does it cost for a new snowplow, and is it within the total figure that you have available?
New snowplow is approximately $5,000 to $6,000.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident the old snowplow that I have in mind will work.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or more discussion?
I just wondered,
Nancy?
did we ever hear anything from Kupernoff about the services they provide that would be covered by this payment in lieu of taxes, which is, according to the definition, is for services they provide that aren't being covered by taxes they collect?
I don't know, did we formally
I don't know, I just
send a
wondered.
letter of request for that?
I don't know.
I'm not sure if we've asked for that
But we
information.
haven't
I
heard
did
anything.
not, unless it was brought up at the last meeting.
I don't know that we officially took action.
No, we didn't, I
asking,
just
okay.
wondered, but we haven't heard anything either.
No,
Okay.
I guess not.
Just wondered.
Okay, any more discussion on the second reading of ordinance 2014-21 as it's been changed, I guess is a way to put it. Seeing no more discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
And Kurt.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2014-21 passes unanimously. The next item on tonight's agenda, under unfinished business, is approval of the amended 2015-16 capital improvements project list. Since our last meeting, so the CIP list has been updated to show the changes made by the Assembly at the October 6th meeting and to include the addition of Petersburg Mental Health's building renovation project that was not included on the original list. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2015-16 capital projects list.
Second.
Moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Walhooter to approve the capital projects list. Any discussion?
Just a question.
Bob?
Manager, you show funding here of $5,100,000 already on hand. Can you go through what constitutes that 5 million?
On the police department building?
Yes.
Okay. It is all at this point, I can't break it into the individual pieces for you, but I can tell you the sources, if that makes sense. It's all legislative grant money. The biggest chunk came from a $2.5 million grant from the legislature. We got another one for $1 million. The legislature reallocated money from the old fire hall project, the new fire hall project, to this project. And I think we got a $350,000 planning grant early on in the process to pay for some of the architectural work. So at this point, that $5 million is made up of solely legislative grant money. No borough funds are in that mix yet. I think I got them all. But it's all legislative money at this point.
Any other questions or discussion? Cindy?
I am having a senior moment, but it was either mental health or the school. I recall from the last meeting that we recommended they had some matching funds that they had already applied that should be included here, but I don't see matching funds for either of those, and I can't remember which one we were having the discussion with.
Matching funds into the police department?
That was with the hospital.
That was a hospital.
Was it the hospital? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was, I believe.
Okay, just making sure.
Any other discussion on the capital projects list as it's changed?
Did I get everybody's changes, I guess, is the big question.
I think so.
Kathy relayed them to me, and we added the Petersburg Mental Health down under the other, down at the bottom of the list.
I see that, and I see the number 12 is the Marine Terminal Drive down, and then there's some rearranging of the top 5 or 6. During the A&B A&S weekend, I had a chance to visit with Kathy Munoz, the only representative in our area, or senator that's on any of the finance positions, and she said she would help however she could for financing, even though we know money's going to be pretty tight at the state level this year with the oil prices the way they are and everything. But that was nice to have encouragement from a representative that, isn't even our representative. So we have an ally up there. So, is there any more discussion? John?
Just a quick thing. When Governor Parnell was speaking, he suggested we only turn in 3 or 4 projects. But we already have this set up, but I don't know if that makes any difference or not.
If the mayor, I mean, I can speak to how we will do this at this point. The governor's office will get a very scaled down version of this. They may not even get all of the priority items. I've got to call into our lobbyist, Ray's supposed to get back to me this week to tell me how does he want to approach the governor's office. This is not the legislature, this is the governor's list. Generally, we don't get any funding from that source, but we always do send them something. When it gets to the legislature, we will send them this entire list. The only thing that will be discussed in detail are those top 12 projects. Okay, so in other words, all of these down here on the list, it'll just be the line item with a dollar amount. There won't be a paragraph just explaining the project. Assemblymember Havlicek's correct. I mean, we've heard that a couple times from various people that they're not looking for large lists at this point. That being said, it's just basically a spreadsheet We will enter all of it into CAPSIS so that it's all there. If somebody changes their mind down their way and wants to fund something, they can. When we go to Juneau, I was expecting kind of what happened like last year, which is really the only project we talk about is the police station. Unless one of the legislators actually brings it up and says, well, I've got a question about. So, obviously, I'll do whatever the Assembly wants us to do. If you want to go say only send them 3, we'll send them 3. But until I talk to the lobbyist, I'm not exactly sure what direction he's going to want to recommend us to go. If that kind of helps.
Any other discussion or questions, Bob?
At what point do you have to have the list to the governor? Do you,
That was my question today.
Sooner.
I looked at my last year's list, and the date on the letter was kind of December. I think that's late. So I have a feeling that soon is an important answer. But with the election, it may change the dynamics here. They may not even be looking at this stuff until after they know the results of the November election.
I would assume that, Bob?
one of the things we've been told is that if we add money to these projects, we have much more opportunity. So does that mean then that we, and I think that was John's question at one of the other meetings, that it would be very helpful if we were to make some decisions to maybe put more money to a couple of those projects. Is that right, John?
I believe that is a valid observation.
If
Now, again, I'd like to talk to our lobbyist to confirm that, just to be sure. But you know, I've thrown out a couple of different funding plans on the police station at various times that, you know, highlight some places where we could pull money from that would show that borough. You know, and if the Assembly chooses to go that route, I would change this form slightly to really highlight that. It'd be legislative money, here's all the money the borough is throwing at it to try to make sure that's well understood. Again, without talking to Ray, I don't know what he's going to recommend. But
Any other questions with the manager, discussion on the capital projects list? Yeah, I think it's sometime in November is when Ray in the past has suggested getting this to the governor. And I think the list we have formulated here is not a bad thing to send, because last year's a prime example when the Columbarian was $85,000. Sam Keto could get some money, and we got the money for that. You know, so if it's not on the list, and if they don't see it, then they don't know what our other little projects are. And maybe before we go to this legislature, you'll know who's elected, who's in office, and we can maybe put up a scenario like you've done before with taking money from different enterprise funds or whatever for matching money for the police station, if that's what we decide to do. So,
you know, I was less pushy with Ray last year than I will probably be this year on this issue. I think it's more important this year than ever before to say the borough's got some skin in the game here. Ray last year kind of wanted to do it, though let's see what the legislature does. I think this year, we're pretty much, we need to say something. That's my opinion. But
okay, any more discussion on the approval of the capital projects list as modified? Okay, seeing no hands. Kathy, will you call the roll?
Mark?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Jim?
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimous. That is the list we will use, maybe with some tweaks here and there. New business. The first item under new business is a resolution authorizing procurement of portable emergency services radios through the Alaska State Purchasing Contract. The resolution provides for the purchase of grant-funded radios through the state's local government purchasing contract at the cost of $60,835.32. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this resolution. 14-16 is the number.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to adopt or approve Resolution 14-16. Any discussion? I have a little concern with this. Some of it's been alleviated, but these radios, if I'm not mistaken, I'll ask Steve the question or Sandy, these radios are to replace some radios that we purchased in 2013. Is that true, or is that not accurate information? The radios that, Sandy?
It is somewhat true. Through funding for the fire station, we upgraded the radio system and did the narrowband conversion at the end of 2012. And at that time, we got radios that were consistent throughout the whole borough so that we could have one maintenance of those radios. And immediately we discovered that the radios were not properly functioning for public safety. So for the police department and the fire department, transmission and reception were not good. I immediately started complaining about that, asking, is it the narrow banding that's the issue? Is it the radio that's the issue? What do we need to do to correct that? When Kelly got here, he started looking into it and obviously has more experience with the radio stuff. He had someone look into it, and the radios that we bought were not technically public safety type of radios. They are day-to-day use type of radios, but they're not really beneficial for what we do. We don't get the range that we need. And so that's what this grant's about. And I didn't really do a lot of the work for it, but I'm definitely on board with it. So we're not replacing all of the radios, just the police officers will all get new radios, and then just a handful of fire department people will get radios at this time.
Okay, and then the range issue is something that's one of the issues that I'm kind of concerned about. So these new radios, these 20 handheld radios or whatever we're going to authorize this expenditure for, which is a grant, it's not coming out of our coffers. Do they have more range? Are they 6-watt radios like the other ones, or are we going to have to put up repeaters later to get the range we want? Or?
Well, part of this whole thing that we're working towards is to put up another tower, because the tower we have at the fire station is like a backyard tower. It really wasn't suitable for what we need it for. It can't house the antennas that we need. The fire department has never had a repeater for our frequency, but the police department does. So the plan is to move the repeater from the police department up to the fire station because it's higher elevation, plus on a tower will give us better range. We'll be able to go a little bit further out the road. We'll be able to pick up radio traffic on Sandy Beach, which we cannot do now. There's dead spots. Scow Bay, the same, and it's only 2 miles away. So we're having issues there, and then the fire department will get a repeater system for our frequency.
Okay, the repeaters, is that included in this money, or that's something we're going to have to get funding for?
I believe it is, yes.
2 different grants. There's another grant that is
for the
tower and repeater, in addition to money that the assembly earmarked for part of this project in last year's budget.
Okay.
Yes.
At this point, I think the money out of pocket for the borough, other than the previous allocation, was like $3,000 or something like that. I'm sorry, Jody couldn't attend the meeting and she had to, but it's by the time you take in the other grant, the money that was previously allocated for a new antenna and the repeaters, it was $2,500 to $3,000 that we'll come back for when we get that far. We were hoping to convince them to up the grant again.
Okay. Bob?
Now I have a question. Do we have it backwards? If we were to put up a new repeater system with more towers, would the current radios work? And should that be tried first rather than going the other way? That's a question I have.
I can't answer that. It's a very valid question. One of the things is the challenge of different grants coming at different times. And the Homeland Security grant for these radios showed up. We applied for it, didn't know when we'd get it, and sure enough, here we go. We have it. Whether or not, I have to assume an antenna and a repeater would help any radio get better, whether it's the ones we currently have or the ones that they're recommending that we buy. I talked to Kelly this afternoon a little bit, and he explained, some of the things that these public safety radios can do that are, I think used the word better quality, but number one, they're submersible, so they can get wet. And they also have I don't know the right terminology for this, but they have a noise reduction setup on them that allows it, make it easier to hear when there's a lot going on in the background, versus the radios that we have today don't have that feature. And then the last thing he mentioned was it sounds silly, but the accessories. These new radios are, for example, they have GPS embedded in them. So the dispatchers can actually look and see where a police officer, where that radio is. So it becomes kind of a safety thing. The radios can also be set up to text, or basically silent communication. So if an officer is in a position, or a fireman in a position where they can't hear, they can actually use the radio almost like a text smartphone type setup. We're not getting that feature, but they have that ability to be added if at some point we wanted. And then the last thing was the whole accessory thing with, particularly in the police area, the ability to go where they can hear, but the radio is not, you can't hear it. In other words, your headsets, where they're in positions where they can't be, they don't want the radio to squawk, yet they still need to be in communication. It's not that our current radios can't do that, it's just that the accessories available for the current brand of radio we have are very limited. As Sandy mentioned, they're not really designed for public safety, so they don't have all the little extra bells and whistles that you can choose to buy. This grant includes, if you'll look at it, I think each radio is like $2,200. The rest of it is some of those bells and whistles, expanded battery power, chargers, the headphones. And that seemed to be the story when I talked to a couple of the officers. They complained a little bit about the radios. They actually complained more about the lack of the gadgets, the accessories. Well, they don't have an earphone that works really well, or it's hard to hear when there's a lot of background noise. That seemed to be more of their, a big thing they were talking about. Sandy, I don't know if you can add to any of that.
I can't really speak for the police department, but fire department, we don't need all the gadgets and stuff. We just need to be able to communicate, which was my preface when we did the narrow banding and got the new radios to begin with. And as soon as we did that and our quality went down tremendously, you can't hear, you can't communicate, and it is life safety issues. And so we are hoping that this will fix the problem.
But I mean, back to Bob's concern, it's a valid concern. I think any radio system would be better with a better, taller antenna and repeaters. Whether or not it fixes the whole problem, I can't answer. I don't know.
When does that grant expire?
Sandy, do you know?
No. Again, the police department's been working on it.
It's probably one of those, Homeland Security, we're limited. I mean, we can't buy anything other than what was applied for. They're very specific about that. So if the Assembly chooses not to do this permanently, then we give the money back to Homeland Security, and then we just apply for something else later down the road. They don't retask money. As far as delaying the decision, that could be done. I don't think the grant just showed up. I think we've probably got at least a little bit of time to, quote, accept it, and I just don't know what that time frame is.
Do we have a radio, or have we tested this radio that we want to buy in our environment?
Sandy, do you know if when they were here doing that, if they tested those or not?
I want to say that they did, but I'm not positive. I know Kelly ran around with the radio consultant person.
Yeah, they drove to the end of the road and back, but I don't know.
Any other, Cindy?
The only comment I would make, having been involved with forest fires and other emergency things when I worked for the Forest Service, is communications are key. And to me, the piece that they're submersible and they can withstand a marine and wet environment is important. And so for that reason, I would say it makes sense to go for it.
Jay?
Yeah, I don't know I guess I don't even know what's relevant, but hearing end of 2012, early 13 is when these new radios were bought, and now we're going to be shelving them. As a point of clarification is, so these one-year-old radios that we're ready to be rid of now, what did the borough pay for those, and was it grant funded or out of pocket?
The total cost for those radios at that time was, there was 200 radios and 200 that were tuned to could be changed to narrowband, and it was $160,000. And I don't know if that was a grant or if there was that money left over from
was-
the state grant for the fire hall?
Correct. And
Okay, that's
it
what I
was for
thought.
the whole borough. It was not 200 radios. I can't remember exactly the number of radios, but yes, there were quite a few radios. And then we also got all new pagers for the fire department because of the narrow banding requirement. The radios that we had could not be narrow banded. I don't know what the appropriate term is. I don't remember. Carl, do you remember? And then they did narrow band all the radios that could be, so we didn't replace every single radio, but the handheld radios all got replaced, and all of our pagers got replaced for the fire department. And that was paid for through the fire hall money that we got from the legislature. I didn't know what to say. Pardon me?
So, the grant from the state. And
Yes.
I want to just
And-
add
oh,
one thing. If I
may I-
can.
Sorry, may I?
Well, go ahead,
one
you-
more? And we're not gonna just get rid of these radios. If we, because especially the fire department, will keep our radios and use for intercommunication. We're only gonna get, I don't know, the fire department I think is getting 8 or 10 radios, which will go to the chief officers. We're still gonna continue to keep those radios. If we determine that it is part of the solution for our problem, then we probably could resell those radios to someone else or reassign them to another borough department to use.
Now, the discussion has been had about these new radios being waterproof, and the old radios, I know were an ICOM brand. I have a handheld ICOM that's waterproof. Are these waterproof, the ones we currently have? Do you know? Or-
I believe they're water resistant. I don't know if you can drop them in water or not.
Just some clarification. Using one thing that, I know by ordinance we can authorize this procurement, which we probably couldn't if I remember the discussions we had today downstairs while we're a city, but now we can. But something of this size, $60,000, $61,000, if we don't approve this tonight, or even if we do approve this tonight, in the future, I would like to see it go out for RFP for bid. And I've talked to one local provider today, and he said he couldn't supply this specific brand of radio that the Motorola's that we're recommending. But I think it would be fair for people to have the opportunity to put in a bid. So just for future reference, I just wanted to put my feelings on that matter out there.
And that's one of those things, Mayor, that if the assembly wants, staff in the borough to, change that, the purchasing ordinance, and either, to specify that, to say, we won't use the state, pre-bid contracts or these co-op purchasing things in the future, we can definitely make that happen. I mean, it's one of those things that we've started trying to do because it saves time, because they're pre-bid, and everybody can choose to throw their name in the hat with the state, and then the low bidder gets put out on that state website that says, hey, these have already been pre-done by the state's purchasing group. So the question is, just because it's there doesn't mean we have to use it. The assembly
Correct.
can decide. It would be helpful for us, though, to know ahead of time if that's where you want to go, because then we'll just know that we've got to bid everything out.
Even if it is an ordinance form, that we can do that. If we put out an RFP, can the state procurement people, can they bid on it, the Alaska State Purchasing Contract, or would they? Or am I not understanding the whole picture here? I don't know who can explain that to me.
Carl, do you want to give that one a try?
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can add something. If the borough did put out an RFP for radios in this case, it would surely allow a local provider to bid on it, and surely the vendor that provided the winning bid to the state would also put in a bid, although they would be tied to most likely be tied to their numbers that they have provided the state already. Perhaps not.
Okay.
Maybe it's a separate bid process, so they might be able to change their number. But it's somewhat unfair from the standpoint of the other vendors knowing exactly or pretty darn close what that winning vendor is going to put as a cost on the radios or whatever product it is.
Well, we'd have a list in front of us today with all the breakdown of the cost for everything, so that everybody, if there was to go to bid, would know what he could supply it for. So I understand that. Any other discussion?
And just one more, I guess, to make sure I heard you right before, $160,000 is what went out 2 years ago on that 160.
Without getting a number from the finance department, that is the
Ish.
number that was given to me from the person that supplied the job, and it involved getting the narrow banding done by a certain date to keep our licensing with federal government
You bet.
required. We changed to narrow band, I think, from broadband or whatever it was.
Yep, familiar with that. And I guess regardless of wherever we go with this, I just want it to be the right tool so that we're not having this discussion a year and a half, 2 years later because of X, Y, or Z problem, and suddenly we're, then only be $500,000 more to fix it at that point. We'll be good. And maybe I'm being a little paranoid that we're going to end up in that spot, but that's a big number to be talking about again a year and a half later. That's all.
I agree with you on that, and it sounds like it's a safety issue if you can't talk between the responding vehicles, or the policeman out of his vehicle can't talk to the station, or, but like Mr. Lynn was talking about earlier, could we put up another tower? What's that cost? So, I mean, I suppose the option is we could table this and look for more information, or, I don't know. It's, in my mind, it's kind of I don't know, it's a decision we have to make, I guess. But Kurt?
Mr. Mayor, just one more clarification here, and maybe Sandy can help on this one if you can't answer this to the manager. But you said that Chief Schweihart took this in and drove around with it, and he was satisfied with the performance of this radio?
Yes. Whether or not they went out the road and charted where they could talk and where they weren't, the chief he was the one who made this recommendation after. Basically the story was, Kelly comes in, he's the new guy in town, he starts asking people, well, how's things work, and then, it's going to sound really bad, he's a little more active. I mean, some of it's learning the community, some of it is his style, but he is out on the street a lot more, so he's starting to notice, okay, hey, this is a problem. He tries to use the radio and can't. So he knew this gentleman that does a lot of work throughout Alaska with the state troopers and public safety. So he calls him and says, hey, would you be willing to come and look at our system because it's not working well? The guy was willing to come here for free. Kelly put him up at his house and fed him. And he looked at the system. Be clear, the guy's also a vendor. He sells these radios. So, there's a vested interest there. He went through the whole thing, sat down with me and Kelly, explained where he felt the problems were, and it was multiple problems. It was the radios themselves, the tower itself, lack of repeaters. I made it very clear to him that I wanted a system built that is expandable, that at some point, if we're asked to supply services to the end of the road, that we have a system that can be expanded to do that without having to start all over again. And he swore to me that this system would work that way. But it's not really the radios as much as it is the repeaters and the antenna type thing. I got a very good feeling from him that he knew what he was talking about. But no offense, guys, but he could probably BS me all day, and I wouldn't necessarily know. I'm not an expert on radios. But Kelly met with him, spent a lot of time. He was here, Sandy, 2-3 days?
Yes.
Pretty thorough evaluation. Looked at some of the problems the fire department was having with the repeaters that hadn't even been installed yet because they won't fit on the antenna. Is that the
radios that need to be installed, and the tower that we currently have won't house more than 1 or 2 antennas without canceling each other out or whatever. And that was a design error when we got our building and requested a tower, because I'm technologically challenged. So I rely on everybody else to tell me what they need. I'm like, okay.
So it's all over the board. I mean, I think in one way it's why when we submitted this grant application, we only did public safety. I mean, we're not trying to replace every one of those radios that were purchased. It's specifically to the public safety radios. A few for the fire department, and I think it's 20, give or take, whatever it is, for the police department.
Bob, you had another comment or question?
Yeah, well, I'd like to make a motion that we table this until there's a lot of questions running around here, and I'm not sure we have all the answers for. I agree with Cindy, we need good communication, no question there. But I hear a lot of questions here that we don't have full answers for. And if we can hold that grant for another few months till we get some, we get a little bit more comfortable, I think it'd be worthwhile. So I'd make a motion that we table it until Steve gets some more information coming back to the assembly with a proposal.
So the motion is to table it until, it'd be nice if we knew how long the grant was good for. I mean, is it typically, are they good for 6 months? Are they good for?
Hello, do you know, I mean, you dealt with a Homeland Security, Carl. I mean, Homeland Security is.
Oh, she's been sitting there back there quiet.
No, I mean, I'm just.
Steve, my experience with Homeland Security grants is they'll last at least a year.
Okay.
So if we just received it, it should be good for a while. But I've not been involved in this grant at all, so
No,
I hope I'm not steering anybody in the wrong direction.
We will check regardless, but this is Homeland Security money, it comes with a lot of strings, is all I can tell you. There's very specific rules on how we spend it. And, if we don't buy these radios, I mean, literally to exactly these things, we send the money back.
The specs that are on the price list?
They are very, very specific when it comes to how they want money spent. If you don't outline it, you basically say, here's exactly what I want. They say they'll give you money for it or not. If you don't buy that, basically you don't spend their money. You can't change in midstream and go, we changed our mind, we really want something else over here. That's not allowed.
Okay, I guess we have a motion on the floor.
I'll
Is there a second?
I'll second
Okay,
that.
motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Mr. Walhooter to table the resolution authorizing procurement of the portable emergency services radios through the Alaska State purchasing contract till a time where we could get more information. I think some of the information that should probably be gathered is the range with the towers and stuff we have. Is this going to solve our problem that we have? I mean, the gentleman that was going to supply the equipment should be able to answer that. He's been to Petersburg, I would think. So I'm not trying to say this isn't a good idea, but I just, like Member Lynn said, there's seems to be a few questions amongst the assembly about this. John?
Mr. Mayor, I think if the chief went out with them and they did test this, I think that's already been answered. I don't think Kelly would have recommended this unless he was confident it was useful, because he knows there's a problem with what we have. So I would be more in favor to back the chief and go with this.
Did any other discussion? Sandy, do you have a comment?
Well, I know that Kelly and this gentleman did a lot of back and forth, and most of the time I think I was included, but I obviously ill-prepared tonight, sorry. But Randy Holmgreen worked on the grant, so I'm sure he has all that backup documentation, and I believe he'll be back next week. So we could probably get the assembly more information next week or the following week, before the next assembly meeting.
It could be brought up again at the meeting of November 3rd, I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a specific question to the chief is, do these radios reach all the areas he currently needs? I mean, just because, like Jay was saying, we buy these, and then not that we're going to not use the radios that we've already purchased, but to buy another pretty good sum of money's worth of radios and have them needed towers here and there to handle service area one, it might be worth, I don't know, looking into something different. But like you say, the grants are very specific. Any other discussion, Kurt?
I'd make one more comment here, and I'm going to agree with John here. I'm at that point where I would probably vote for this just to back up the chief or two, but I will be a lot more settled at the end of next meeting when we have more information. So, I'll probably vote yes on this eventually, but I'd like to get some more information.
Well, I believe I support this wholly, but I just a little more information would be good, and I might be able to call in for the next meeting. That's a noon meeting.
Yes.
That's 2 hours after pheasant hunting opens that day, so I don't know if I'll make it. Anyway, any more discussion on the motion to table this until we get more information, which could potentially be the meeting of November 3rd. It could be on the agenda again for that day. If we're not satisfied with the information, bump it back again, I guess.
Third works.
If you have questions, send them to me. I've written some of them down, but
Okay.
that would be helpful. I can get them to Randy and the vendor.
So if there's no more discussion on the motion to table this until more information is gathered, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John.
No.
Okay, the motion passes to table this resolution until more information is gathered, potentially November 3rd meeting, 5 to 2. Okay, a resolution supporting international joint commission involvement in the Alaska-British Columbia Trans-Boundary Region. And we had some testimony to this resolution earlier on, and comments related to tonight's agenda, and people were in support of this, the ones that all spoke. Petersburg Vessel Owners Association has asked for support of their efforts to urge the United States government to work with the government of Canada to refer transboundary development issues in the British Columbia, Alaska region to the International Joint Commission. The commission would be charged with using all powers under the Boundary Waters Treaty to ensure our southeastern Alaska resources are not harmed by upstream development. Petersburg Vessel Owners has submitted the resolution to the Alaska Municipal League for their support as well. I entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 14-17.
I so move with the changes.
We could, that
recommended.
under discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's been moved
so
by
moved.
Member Lagadakis,
I'll second
seconded
that.
by Member Walhuter.
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, to adopt this resolution. Discussion. Changes, right?
Yes, I think we should adopt the changes recommended by Brian Lynch in his testimony.
Striking the 5th and 9th whereas.
That's correct.
Mr. Bob, Lynn, do you have a comment?
And I agree with Brian, is that although they're true, the same points he made, is although they're in service, they're true, but there probably need to be a little bit more work on them. So I agree with Brian, and I agree with making the change.
Okay, any more discussion on this resolution? Clerk, call the roll.
This is asked what the changes are.
Yes, yes, sorry.
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Jay.
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 14-17 passes with changes unanimously. Now we have consideration of amendment number 4 to the professional service agreement with Dowell HKM for the design of Pump Station 1 forced main. The amendment is for $32,190 and would bring Dowell's total contract to $219,199. Design of the project is being funded by a $270,000 ADEC loan. Entertain a motion for consideration of this amendment.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to amend this contract for $32,190. Any discussion? So Carl, this is just for the design of this then, I guess, is in the project? Okay. Any questions of Carl or any discussion by the assembly members? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Okay, that is adjusted. Any communications by any assembly members or any staff or anybody? Seeing none. Assembly discussion items. Is there any recognitions by any assembly members or staff? Seeing none? Oh, Cindy?
Actually, although Steve mentioned it, I really did want to thank Parks and Rec, ANBANS, and PIA. At least from an outsider's view, how Grand Camp went together, I think, went really well, and it was. I heard good comments from the participants, and it made it easy for the chamber to be involved as well. So I thank folks very much for all their efforts. I know it was a lot of work.
Any other? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to recognize some of the friends of Annabelle Baker for the late Annabelle Baker of Petersburg for raising $1,200 this weekend towards cancer research. A lot of really great people turned out and had a great Annabelle celebration.
All right, very good. I'll have to add a little bit to what Cindy was talking about how well the A&B-A&S thing went. I attended a few of the functions over the weekend, and everybody I talked to said that they were very happy with the hospitality that Petersburg put forward, and they're happy to be here. So maybe they'll come back sooner than 44 years. Okay, any more recognitions? Okay, seeing none. Next item is the Alaska Mental Health Trust Land Office letter of September 17th about Pappy's Landing parcels for sale. They must still be deciding how that's going to proceed, and this will remain on the agenda until action is taken by the Assembly. So there's no new news then, basically, right? Okay. All right. Next item, Assembly Member Haverlick is asked for a discussion on borough services and our borough service areas. So John, what do you want to discuss? I guess?
Well, basically, rather than take this on tonight, I was hoping we could put it as an agenda item and invite members of the public to come and talk about the issues they have with what's offered in Service Area 1 and what's offered or not offered outside service areas, and then look at publishing that and putting it on the radio so everyone understands, one, what a service area is, and the other, who's eligible for what services. And because I've gotten a bunch of comments, especially from people outside Service Area 1, saying we had more services before we were a borough. From just contacts and things like that, the fire response, police response things, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. But what I'd like to do is hear from members of the public what their concerns and questions are, and then put something out, like I said, on the radio and in writing, saying this is what a service area is. This is who gets what. This is like if you call from out the road or across the way and about an injury or something worse. Who do you call? The troopers? Do you call the police? Will the harbor send a boat over? Things like this, because I know we have had these issues before, and there have been responses, but again, I'm vague on it, and I can't give these people a definitive. So that's why I was hoping we could have some public input on it, and then disseminate that information, and so everyone is on the same page in essence.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on Mr. Haverlick's discussion item?
I'd like to, and I've heard the same things as John has heard, particularly related to responses. One person just called me today and said, well, in the original report that went to the LBC, there was a list of all the calls that were made outside of town and responses that were made, and now we don't get any. And I'm with John, and I would add, but one other thing is that I'd like to put up onto the city's website the same thing and allow that to be, let people respond to it if we could. And then we can have a discussion, I think a better discussion of it.
I think as far as what service, Sandy, I see you back there wanting to comment, so.
Just in defense of the fire department, for ambulance and fire calls, we have not changed our policy at all. So if they're not getting services, then they're not calling us, because we have always gone when we get called. EMS and fire, if it's dark and the weather's bad, obviously by the time we get there, there's not going to be much to save other than outbuildings or their neighbors. But we do go if we can go. EMS-wise, we've always gone unless the tide's out and we can't get there, or again, the weather's bad and our safety's in jeopardy. But anytime we get the call, day or night, we go. And that has not changed since we became a borough. We still don't charge for fire, and EMS gets the same bill that in-town Service 1 area gets. So if there's a problem, I am not aware of that.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
Just as a reminder, and I don't know how far out the road they go, but you guys handed out house numbers that people could put up so we could be identified and found. So correct. I agree with you.
maybe it's just a matter of clarification as to what the borough charter says now, what you have to do to form a service area to get services you want. And, you know, I read it before the borough transition and everything, and so I was up to speed on it, but it seems to me like you have to ask for the service area and then vote on it. And there's maybe just a clarification on what it takes to form a service area to get the services that you require. And then maybe give numbers that you need to call to get the services. I think it's, I don't.
Well, and, you know, and to have, I'm sorry, to have a public discussion on that. And like Sandy was saying, they're still gonna respond like they have before, but, you know, and I don't know, you know, and that's why I'd like to have a public discussion and have clarification, because then you get rumors involved saying, oh, well, I'm at Papke's, the fire or the EMTs aren't gonna come and serve me because I'm not in service area 1. You know, and the thing is that's not true, but people are confused about that. And you know, or I'm out the road Banana Point, I've had an accident, or I need, you know, the fire department or, you know, EMT or something like that. Are they going to come out to Banana Point? That I think everybody needs, we all need to be on the same page and let everybody know that this is what the page says.
Okay. Kathy, where do you suggest we would put that? Just under council discussion and then advertise it? And I mean, I don't, what?
That's nothing you're gonna take action on each time.
No.
So it probably should remain as a discussion. But we gotta get word out to people to come and make comment.
Right, I guess that's what we're after, right? Is clarification and communication.
Clarification, right?
And clarification, including other services like snow removal and other services that property taxes cover. I can understand the ambulance EMTs and the fire. Doesn't everybody get a bill for an ambulance call? No matter where they are? So that service hasn't changed at all, but if they want additional services, then they need to be educated. We all probably need to be educated about why they need to form a service area.
And, you know, Kathy pointed out something to me. I mean, we pulled the charter, try to look at, you know, charter's really clear. I mean, you could argue that the charter says we shouldn't be responding to fire, we shouldn't be sending police officers. I mean, that's what the charter says. And when Kathy pulled the documents from the charter preparation meetings, that apparently was what the folks who wrote the charter wanted. So, you know, that's the tough part the group in the back of the room, plus a few others, are going to have is, what does the assembly want us to budget for? You know, and if we're going to do something over and above what the charter says, then we kind of need the assembly to weigh into this and say, Steve, please, we want you to do this, despite what the charter says. You know.
But I think one thing we do need to do, Steve, is there was in my mind, a promise made that the services that were provided beforehand would continue. And I think maybe we need to benchline those, because I think there's also, you know, argument back and forth one way or another.
So what we may have is a conflict between what was written into the charter and that statement.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so we will put that on the next meeting's agenda.
Sure, yeah.
John, is a
Yeah,
discussion item
yeah,
and
I just want
advertise what we're going to talk
clarifications
about.
mainly.
Okay. Any more discussion to be had on borough services and or borough service areas that Member Havlick wanted to bring up?
I'd like to
Kurt?
make one more comment here, and it's kind of relates to some of John's questions. Is that, you know, what's the ramifications? What is it going to look like when somebody becomes service area 2? That's kind of what I'm waiting for. You know, I mean, we've got service area 1, and then we got everybody else. You know, I was waiting for groups to kind of step up and say, well, we want to be service area 2. And so what's that going to look like, and what does that entail, and you know, what's their obligation? So I agree with you. I think we need to have this discussion sooner than later.
Whether they want zoning or a police department or a fire department, and how they're going to fund it, and everything else online. Okay, any more discussion about that?
Mr. Mayor, are we taking any comments from people in the audience? I noticed Mr. Wood had his hand up about a question or a statement, maybe. Is that?
Well, I suppose we could have talked about your views related to the agenda, but I'm pretty easy. It's early yet, it's only 8:30.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I only had one comment here when you were discussing this. There was an incident earlier this summer where there was a fellow found deceased on the beach at Keene Channel. The people who found him called 911 and was told that the police wouldn't come out, that it was outside the boundary, and so the troopers finally showed up with an airplane, took the fellow away. I just thought I'd mention that there's some confusion here maybe. I know I assumed that the borough would take, police and fire and ambulance and the EMTs, whatever, inside the borough boundaries, but it might pay to have that clarified a little bit. Good.
Mr. Mayor, I have got some information on that, and that is because it was a deceased body laying on the beach, the troopers have to be involved in that because it's a crime scene until it's proven otherwise. And so that's why the city was unable to do it. So.
We were standing by, ready to go.
Right.
Yeah. And we have to be basically asked by the troopers to respond to that. It is their crime scene. It is, they're in charge of law enforcement outside of Service Area 1. So it's basically a secure the scene and wait and hope the troopers can show up timely. In this sense, I believe Cody was out of town, and so they ended up having to fly someone in.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Now we're on to another discussion item that was asked to be put on the agenda by Member Strand. She's asked to discussion to be given to the Skagway ordinance addressing the sale or application of herbicides and pesticides. So Nancy, what you just wanted to talk about their ordinance? Is that what it was?
Right, and are we going to present, and are we going to have an ordinance based or, modeled after Skagway's and because I really do think that we need to protect ourselves as much as we can. And we may not be able to have any say over what the state does on their property in our borough, but we could at least require them to notify us when they're spraying. So I think this ordinance, and the feedback we got tonight indicates the same. This might be, this Skagway ordinance is a good model, and I think we should probably
So you think we should have an ordinance on
have our own
on a upcoming meeting to address this, the state spraying herbicides and pesticides in our borough?
And to have an ordinance ready at that next meeting, maybe.
Did the state back off on spraying on Prince of Wales Island? Didn't they delay it this fall because of the public outcry?
Yes.
So maybe they're listening, but I guess if we make some kind of a formal
We
comment,
have to
it would
do
help.
something, because if the governor isn't aware of there being an issue about spraying, then we perhaps need to indicate to him that there is concern.
Excuse me, I heard that on the radio today too. And have we adopted a resolution or anything to support this, Kathy, that you recall?
We've sent stuff out. In fact, actually, I think it was this community that started it.
I think it was. And did it go to the governor's office?
Yeah,
I thought it may have, so.
And
It's
just
not
be-
like we're sitting back. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Sid.
To be clear, it's two issues. One is the issue of spraying in areas that people are using for subsistence and water flowing into the channel and people collecting water at that spot out the road and having spray in close proximity. The other issue is the lack of public comment. And people are concerned about that as well, not just with this, but with some other actions that the state has taken. So I think it's important to remember that it's not just one thing, it's actually two things that are of concern.
And no offense to the governor, I mean, I don't know how that office is operated, but as Kathy mentioned, that those communications were sent to that office, to the commissioner in charge of DOT, as a few other, including all of our delegation who was working it. So.
We had a ton of communities responding, even up north.
Yeah. It wasn't just southeast, it was very interesting.
It was the interior as well. Yeah. So, Jay?
And I don't think we can be strong enough in our response to that. As was pointed out tonight, this is drinking water. This is places where kids and grandkids play, and we can put any coating on it we want, but we're really talking about spraying poisons into our groundwater right off the road where people are walking their dogs, and I think the state needs to know in uncertain terms how we as a community feel about that. Even if that means we have to repeat ourselves multiple times, I'm comfortable with that.
Well, possibly as a starting point, we could mirror Skagway's ordinance. I haven't read it, and we could That's just a thought. Bob?
I'm with Cindy, there's two issues here that we need to deal with. I think Skagway's, and I read it and reread it, is pretty onerous myself. And trying to make those determinations and have somebody on the borough staff to be able to make those calls the way this is written is really, we'd have to hire another person, I believe. I'd defer to Steve, but I don't have the experience, and I have some knowledge of this stuff, and I don't think Steve does. This puts also a lot of burden back on the manager.
I don't think we do a lot of spraying of anything in the borough, so we
Right.
don't have expertise on chemical sprays.
That's my point. So I agree with doing something. I think this is pretty onerous, but I think we need to write something that much better fits our needs here. And address the issues of which Cindy was talking about.
Would anybody on the assembly be willing to help someone at the staff try to come up with some verbiage that would fit us better, Bob? Or, I mean, do you think you could come up with?
I can take a stab at,
We need to-
beginning it and then let somebody else take it over.
It's
See where, and and put it on for a discussion point. I don't have any problem after we once get some draft, putting it up for public comment too. See what folks think.
maybe we'd get some input from the public. It seemed to raise some interest just seeing it on the agenda as a discussion item. So, John?
Mr. Mayor, and I think we can make it pretty simple, just a
Yes.
statement saying, whereas Petersburg doesn't want any pesticides sprayed on our roads.
And whereas we'd like to be notified before the state goes ahead in its bullheaded way and does it.
Can we be recognized, please, so we're in some semblance of order? I know we've been talking back and forth, not trying to be mean or picking on anybody in particular, but, okay, so, thanks, Nancy, for bringing that up. It sounds like it would, brought some good discussion, and we'll try to come up with something where we can make a stronger statement and make sure it gets addressed to all the proper people in
Would it
charge.
work, Mr. Mayor, for us, for staff to get, let's say, the Skagway ordinance in a Microsoft Word format, and then we start lining stuff out from there? In other words, take their ordinance and start deleting and changing things. I mean, as a starting spot to get to Assemblymember Lynn and folks. I mean, does that work for folks? I mean,
Kurt, do you have a comment on?
Well, at first blush, this ordinance that Skagway developed was not pertaining to state land, but to city land.
Right.
So borough land, so right there, we'd have to change it to state land, so, yeah, we could do whatever you guys want to do. I just wanted to let you know that I don't think we should copy it verbatim, because
we can go through a first draft type line out stuff and then let you guys go to town on it.
Nancy?
The recommendation is to use the Skagway ordinance as a model.
Okay.
And of course, we will be changing the names of all the creeks that they listed in Skagway that don't exist here. We have our own creek names, but we could use this as a model, which was what I suggested.
I'm in favor of that.
Sounds like a good starting point. And Steve, you and the staff will get something going for Petersburg Borough's opinion. Any more discussion on this topic, the herbicide pesticide? Okay, and what was the next one, Nancy, that you wanted to?
This heating fuel thing, and I know it was voted down, it was lumped together with groceries and heating fuel. But if you're heating with electricity, you don't pay sales tax on your fuel, your electricity, because it's a city utility and we don't pay sales taxes on it. And it seems to me that the same consideration should be provided for all citizens of the borough who heat with oil. And if it needs to be a needs-based thing, then go do it that way, but expand it to include everybody, not just seniors.
Okay.
So, and I realize it was voted down, but it was voted down for seniors and it included the food, so
So would this
I
be?
have no idea how to.
That was going to be my
deal
question
with
of
that.
Kathy. Would this be something that would have to actually be a ballot thing again?
Have to be, yeah.
Adopted by
It's
three?
You guys' prerogative if you want to pursue it. And then what you come up with, present it on the ballot.
So it would be at the next October election and would be the soonest we could do something about this? We'd have to pass it in ordinance form, 3 readings first to,
Yeah.
okay. Jay, anybody? Not raising their hand? Okay.
I'm just sitting here.
Any more discussion on the possibilities of making all heating fuel tax exempt? So I guess, Nancy, we'd have to decide as an assembly to adopt it by ordinance and put it on next October's ballot unless we had a special election.
I don't know that we need to have a special election, but I do think it needs to be discussed.
Okay.
I'm surprised people haven't brought it up before this.
Okay. What are the wishes of the assembly? Would we like to see if we could get it passed in ordinance, or is it a little bit early for that? Should we wait until the fall to do something when it's more closer to the next election, or should we draft an ordinance and see if we can get it passed and wait till the next election, then it'll be on the ballot? Jay?
I guess a couple of comments on it is, yeah, I think you raise a really valid point, Nancy, in terms of that disconnect between what your fuel source is, a utility, no sales tax, and heating oil with you. Completely. Here's where I get stuck on that is, I really like wood heat. So how do I get my sales tax exemption for driving out the fuel or using my chainsaw? Do I get a tax exemption for buying a chainsaw? And I know I'm reaching a little bit, just bear with me. Or if I was using like pellets, like pellet heat, it opens up a discussion for all heat sources tax exempt. Just just a couple things that came to my mind on there that are potentially problematic. Although again, I see your point very clearly. That's all.
Okay. So, any more discussion on this issue? Okay. Need a motion to recess into executive session. And the purpose of this executive session is for the borough manager performance evaluation. A draft final performance evaluation has been prepared, combining all returned assembly and department head ratings and comments. The use of executive session encourages full and candid discussion of the manager's job performance and preserves the manager's individual rights. The final evaluation, as approved by the assembly, becomes a public record and part of the manager's personnel file. Any changes to the employment terms will be conducted in public session. So I entertain a motion to go into executive session for that reason.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Lagadakis. All those in favor of going into executive session for that reason, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, sounds like it's unanimous. Should we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
10 minutes, whatever it takes?
They're talking about it.
Oh, it's in our email.
There's also talking about the sun. I think we tried to do this with Diane Petersburg. Yeah, and that's said to other people are talking about, well, you can't spray Roundup in your own yard.
And that's what
Well, I wish people wouldn't, but that's pretty far reaching.
this is really on where I think it needs to go.
I think we need to stand fast.
Well,
We need to, my problem, I can't just make decisions. I don't know the public input and people what preempt, what you're telling them to be prepared for.
And my choice would be not to follow this.
No, but I wouldn't.
You know, man, just rather than trying to find something on my iPad, I called the IT guy.
Back up it.
Well, he's not really. You're better off calling
Take
me.
another bunch.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I've
trust
talked
me.
to him. And I doubt that anybody's listening to us on the radio, so.
No, they're not. This is just not our.
This is just
Board is
recorded on the record.
Yeah.
Okay, Assembly's back out of executive session. Executive session was to go over the performance evaluation of our borough manager, Stephen Giesbrick. We had a great summary rating from the assembly members and department heads, and I believe the manager himself that put input. The meets job standards was 2, exceeds job standards 12, outstanding 3. So I would entertain a motion to approve this performance evaluation and agree with the compensation consideration, which is a 2.5% increase in the manager's current salary, which is $113,500. I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
So move.
I'll second.
Been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Lagadakis to approve the manager's compensation increase of 2.5% and to approve this performance evaluation as a public document. So, any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and that brings us to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second. Third.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Well done, Jay.
I knew you were